I got my hair cut recently, which depressingly has probably been the highlight of the last couple of weeks. It was all just getting a bit too long. I mean, I like to think I look like Sawyer from Lost, all rugged and manly, but other people were starting to compare me to the boys from Hanson. So probably time for a cut, but what a long process. A few years back it cost me about £5. I was in and out in 20 minutes, and that was if there was a queue. Now it's the kind of job where I practically need to book a holiday first. 3 hours in that chair, at least half of it with my hair covered in foils to dye it. God, if my dad walked past he'd be so proud. It must be a paternal milestone for him. Son's first words, son's first bike, son's first football game, son's first £80 trip to the salon. Yes, £80. Think what you can buy for that sort of money these days. You can fly to Berlin for 3 days, reach Italy by plane, buy yourself a new TV, and probably even get a cheap seat at Chelsea for that. And yet, if you think about it, with the exception of the blonde bits they put in, I'm actually paying them to take things away from me, all the hair they're cutting off. And if anyone I know does walk past, how embarrassing. Looking like I've got a load of Wrigley's chewing gum wrappers on my head. And when I'm there for 3 hours, that's a long time not to make conversation with the person who's doing the job. If it's a 20-minute cut, you can get away with silence, because I'm not really the sort of guy that likes to talk much in those situations. I mean, call me weird if you like, but I just prefer somebody with sharp scissors in their hand to be concentrating on my hair, and not on where I went on holiday or whether I watched EastEnders last night. But now I've become a metrosexual, there's a big 3-hour section of my life that I need to fill with chat to take my mind off being overwhelmed by the bleach fumes. So other than that, not much going on really. Been a bit ill, bunged up, sore throat, cold symptoms. Not ideal, because I can't blow my nose properly. I'd have to do it in the toilets. I'm just that embarrassed. And the noise I make when I'm in there probably makes people think I'm snorting coke. But I guess all this time being under the weather has given me plenty of opportunity to sit at my computer and see what's been happening out there. For instance, you get to read about Jude Law's thoughts on growing older. He says, and I quote, "I think the beauty of getting older, not ageing, because I'm not that old, is that you just mellow out and realise that to be called anything means people are paying attention." Yeah, I'm sure that's a massive crumb of comfort to anyone who's been called codger, grandad or coffin dodger recently. But for me, it's a genuine problem, living as I do in a student house where I'm the oldest by 5 years. I mean, I'm already been called Uncle Andy, and while most of the flat are up till 3, I'm normally in bed by midnight with a mug of cocoa. I do get my revenge in the morning though. I think that's the one advantage of getting older. You may not be able to stay out as late, but you don't actually look any worse in the morning than you did at midnight, whether that's a good or a bad thing. And you're actually able to raise a smile before midday and the end of this morning. When it comes to relationships, there's a gap too. Talking to my flatmates about grown-up stuff like living together, I get this funny look like I've just started speaking in Latin. Mind you, while their friends are maybe thinking about getting serious, most of mine are getting divorced and thinking of getting serious for the second time. And talking of second times, the Spice Girls comeback tour gets closer. Puff Daddy's donated a £4 million fleet of buses to help transport the girls around the globe for their gigs. But what do you spend £4 million on when it comes to a bus? If it's anything like the buses at my school, I'd spend $1 million of that on drivers who actually like children, as opposed to the ones whose personal mission each day it was to see just how far a child could fly from the back to the front of the bus when they brake suddenly, or how much of a big dent we could each make in the roof when he went over speed bumps at a speed that would make Lewis Hamilton think again. They have a lot of counselling in schools these days for bullying and things like that, but how many kids sit there in the corner clinging to their bags, ashen-faced, repeating, "Please slow down, for God's sake slow down," over and over. Meanwhile, in more serious news this week, the post office guys have been on strike, which means if I'm posting this material to anyone, by the time they get this, most of the so-called topical stuff is going to be a little bit out of date, I think. So to cover myself, just in case this strike continues, here's some comment on things that haven't happened yet, but are probably more than likely to. As more floods hit the UK, the ailing canal system gets a boost, as more people use barges to get around than buses, trains and planes combined. The first residents on the moon are fined for not recycling their moon boots in the correct bin, and with the strike now entering its 74th year, and with the end of the world extremely nigh, Channel 4 tell us of plans to put any survivors in a room, film them for 6 months and make stars of them all. when they were told only cockroaches would survive, they reminded us of Big Brother Series 405, where the contents of one of the contestants' stool sample were filmed and monitored throughout the summer of 2067. And finally for this week, well, I managed to get out once, despite being under the weather. Went clubbing and attempted to dance at one point, but it was in one of those clubs where it's so busy dancing is almost impossible. Some people were trying to robot dance, one brave lad attempted to break dance, or maybe he'd just fallen over. For me, I couldn't get further than the clothes in a mangle dance. People were trying to get past me so often in such a small space that before I knew it, I'd been moved from one end of the dance floor to the other, without actually making any physical effort myself, which didn't make pulling any easier. Mind you, if I managed to do any actual dancing, that probably wouldn't have helped in that respect either.